Yashodanandana Pratyajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanacharya Yamunatira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kanja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kanja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavara Jaya Gopi Jaya Gopi Janavara Srimad Yashodanandana Pratyajanaranjana Yashodanandana Pratyajanaranjana Yamunatira Yamunatira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Kodnacharya Prashasti ki jai, Shri Jasnath Maharaj ki jai, Shri Gurudara ki jai, Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki jai, Rantra Shri Bhagavatam ki jai, Sai Gaura Pramanandi. So we're continuing our reading from Srila Prabhupada Leela Amrita, Preaching to America, Part 2, San Diego, July 27th, 1975. Srila Prabhupada rode down the San Diego freeway in the pre-dawn darkness on his way to San Diego to attend a festival at Balboa Park. On the way, he passed through San Clemente, where former President Richard Nixon was staying. Prabhupada had followed Nixon's exposure and resignation and had often mentioned it in his lectures, sometimes as an example of how even the most powerful men are subject to anxiety and loss. sometimes to illustrate the need for proper training in the four natural social orders. A devotee mentioned that Mr. Nixon lived here with no position, scorned by his countrymen. "Then you should go and preach to him," Srila Prabhupada said. "Since the man has lost everything and was lamenting," he said, "he might be receptive to hearing about the absolute truth." Prabhupada had attempted a similar approach to Mahatma Gandhi. At Balboa Park, Prabhupada was pleased with the devotees' booths and colourful tents and the stage they had erected in the meadow. He had just been addressing the large crowd when a man in the audience began shouting. Prabhupada asked what he was saying, and the devotee explained, "Srila Prabhupada, the man says he wants to have sex more than once a month." "He is creating disturbance," said Prabhupada into the microphone. After a tense moment, Prabhupada continued his lecture. "So, as this man is talking about sex, so this whole material world is enchanted by sex." Taking the shouted protest as a new focus for his speech, Srila Prabhupada quoted Prahlad Maharaj's statement that all material enjoyment begins from sexual enjoyment, which in comparison to transcendental pleasure is paltry and abominable. Real happiness, Prabhupada asserted, is above the senses. Whatever we enjoy with the gross senses is temporary, but permanent enjoyment is transcendental. "So this man," he continued, "was suggesting he wants sex at least once in a month. Yes, that is allowed. 5 days after the wife's menstrual period, the husband and wife can have sex for begetting rightful children." Prabhupada used the Vedic technical term, Garbhadan Samskara, to describe the process of purifying sex within marriage. The devotees were astonished that before a crowd of sexually liberated Southern Californians, Prabhupada was espousing responsible, legitimate sex. Usually he discussed such matters, if at all, in letters to householders. But if the Americans were intent on sex, then Prabhupada would let them have it, but he stressed responsible, restricted sex. Otherwise, by irresponsible sex, one has to suffer. Sex life is not denied, Prabhupada said, but one must take responsibility for sex life. Otherwise, it becomes entangled in so many sinful activities. You can have sex life once in a month. That is prescribed, because a woman has once in a month menstrual period. So sex life is meant for simply begetting nice children, not for sense gratification. If it is in regulative form, the world may not become hell. If it is in irregulative form, then the whole world will be hell. Sex life is not denied. Sex life is not denied, but in a regulated form, so that you can get nice population and live very happily. Especially at the present moment, if you can produce children to become Krishna conscious, that would be a great service to the Lord, because we want a Krishna conscious population. Otherwise, this world is going to hell. There were great emperors, there were great empires, like the Roman, Greek, and later on, the Mughal Empire, the British Empire. Then there was Napoleon, Hitler, Mussolini. So all these powerful empires and men have come and gone. Only a name is there now. Nothing is remaining. So I came to your country, America. I decided to come here because I heard your country is very nice. And when I came here, I saw actually that your country is very nice. Your cities, your buildings, your men also. Because mostly my students are Americans, and they helped me very kindly to push on this movement. So I have studied the American life very nicely. They have a good heart. The only thing that is wanting is Krishna consciousness. For want of this Krishna consciousness, despite all your opulences, you are becoming confused and frustrated. I hear that out of 3, 1 man is a patient of a psychiatrist. Why? Why are you unhappy? Why should you be unhappy? You have got everything, enough food, land, money, intelligence. Why should you be unhappy? The cause of this you should try to find out. The cause is that without Krishna consciousness, without God consciousness, nobody can be happy. The outdoor audience was now quiet and attentive. Prabhupada spoke for about 40 minutes, ranging over different areas of Krishna conscious philosophy, and concluded with a request to all the American men and women to seriously cooperate in Krishna consciousness and thereby find happiness. His talk was greeted with cheers, and the devotees continued to host the crowd throughout the afternoon, chanting and dancing and distributing prasadam. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Now we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 7, The Activities of King Bharat. Text 6. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So the verses doesn't have any meter, it's a prose verse, so I'll read it and then we can do the word for word together. Sampracharatsu nana yageshu virachitanga kriyeshva purvam yattat kriyapalam tamakyam pare brahmani yagya purushe Sarvadevata linganam mantranam artha niyama kataya sakshat katari paradevatayam Bhagavati Vasudeva eva Abhayamana atmanai punyam ridita kashayo Aviswavaryobi Kriyamaneshu sayajamano Yagyavajo devanstang Purushavaya Vishvavyadhyayat. Please repeat. Sampracharatsu. When beginning to perform.
When beginning to perform.
Nana yageshu. Various kinds of sacrifice.
Various kinds of sacrifice.
Virachita. Anga. Kriyeshu. In which these supplementary rites were performed.
In which the supplementary rites were performed.
Apurvam.
Apurvam.
Remote.
Remote.
Yat.
Yat.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Tat.
Tat.
That.
That.
Kriyapalam.
Kriyapalam.
The result of such sacrifice.
Result of such sacrifice.
Dharma Akyam.
Dharma Akyam.
By the name of religion.
By the name of religion.
Pare.
Pare.
Unto the transcendence.
Unto the transcendence.
Brahmani.
Brahmani.
The Supreme Lord.
The Supreme Lord.
Yagya Purushe.
Yagya Purushe.
The enjoyer of all sacrifices.
The enjoyer of all sacrifices.
Sarva.
Sarva.
Devata.
Devata.
Linganam.
Linganam.
Which manifest all the demigods.
Which manifest all the demigods.
Manchanam.
Manchanam.
Of the Vedic hymns.
Of the Vedic hymns.
Arta.
Arta.
Niyama.
Niyama.
Kataya.
Kataya.
Due to being the controller of the objects.
Due to being the controller of the objects.
Sakshat Kartari.
Sakshat Kartari.
Directly the performer.
Directly the performer.
Paradevatayam.
Paradevatayam.
The origin of all demigods.
The origin of all demigods.
Bhagavati.
Bhagavati.
the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
Vasudeva,
Vasudeva,
unto Krishna,
unto Krishna,
Eva,
Eva,
certainly,
certainly,
Bhavayamana,
Bhavayamana,
always thinking,
always thinking,
Atmanai Punya,
Atmanai Punya,
Mridita Kashaya,
Mridita Kashaya,
free from all lust and anger,
freed from all lust and anger,
by his expertise
by his expertise
in such thinking.
in such thinking.
Avishu,
Avishu,
the ingredients to be offered in the sacrifice.
the ingredients to be offered in sacrifice.
Advarayubi,
Varyogi,
when the priests expert in the sacrifices
and the priest expert in the sacrifices
mentioned in the Atharva Veda.
mentioned in the Atharva Veda.
Priyamaneshu,
Priyamanishu,
taking. Sa,
Sa,
Maharaj Bharat.
Maharaj Bharat,
Yajamana,
Yajamana,
the sacrificer.
the sacrificer,
Yagyabhaja,
Yajabhaja,
the recipients of the results of sacrifice.
the recipients of the results of sacrifice.
Devan,
Devan,
all the demigods.
all the demigods.
Tan,
Tahan,
them.
them.
Purusha Avayaveshu,
Purusha Avayeshu,
has different parts and limbs
has different parts and limbs
of the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda.
of the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda.
Abhyadhyayat,
Abhyajayat,
he thought. Translation. After performing the preliminaries of various sacrifices, Maharaj Bharat offered the results in the name of religion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. In other words, he performed all the yajnas for the satisfaction of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna. Maharaj Bharat thought that since the demigods were different parts of Vasudeva's body, he controls those who are explained in the Vedic mantras. He is referring to Vasudeva there. By thinking in this way, Maharaj Bharat was freed from all material contamination, such as attachment, lust, and greed. When the priests were about to offer the sacrificial ingredients into the fire, Maharaj Bharat expertly understood how the offering made to the different demigods was simply an offering to the different limbs of the Lord. For instance, Indra is the arm of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Surya, the sun, is his eye. Thus, Maharaj Bharat considered that the oblations offered to different demigods were actually offered unto the different limbs of Lord Vasudeva. Please repeat. After performing the preliminaries of various sacrifices, Maharaj Bharat offered the results in the name of religion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva. In other words, he performed all the yajnas for the satisfaction of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna. Maharaj Bharat thought that since the demigods were different parts of Vasudeva's body, he, that's Vasudeva, he controls those who are explained in the Vedic mantras. By thinking in this way, Maharaj Bharat was freed from all material contaminations, such as attachment, lust, and greed. When the priests were about to offer the sacrificial ingredients into the fire, Maharaj Bharat expertly understood
Maharaj Bharat expertly understood
how the offering made to different demigods
how the offering made to different demigods
was simply an offering to the different limbs of the Lord.
was simply an offering to the different limbs of the Lord.
For instance,
Indra
is the arm of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Indra is the arm of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
And Surya, the sun,
is
his eye.
Is his eye.
Thus Maharaj Bharat considered that the oblations offered to different demigods were actually offered unto the different limbs of Lord Vasudeva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. So it's quite a long purport, but it's got a lot of strong statements, and it's a very nice purport. So please listen carefully. The Supreme Personality of Godhead says that as long as one does not develop the pure devotional service of Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, one must carry out his prescribed duties. Since Bharat Maharaj was a great devotee, one may ask why he performed so many sacrifices that are actually meant for karmis. The fact is that he was simply following the orders of Vasudeva. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadhaman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Whatever we do, we should constantly remember Vasudeva. People are generally addicted to offering obeisances to various demigods, but Bharat Maharaj simply wanted to please Lord Vasudeva. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktaram yagya tapasam savaloka maheshwaram. A yagya may be carried out to satisfy a particular demigod, but when the yagya is offered to the yagya Purush, Narayan, the demigods are satisfied. The purpose of performing different yagyas is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. One may perform them in the name of different demigods or directly. If we offer oblations to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the demigods are automatically satisfied. If we water the root of a tree, the branches, twigs, fruits, and flowers are automatically satisfied. When one offers sacrifices to different demigods, one should remember that the demigods are simply parts of the body of the Supreme. If we worship the hand of a person, we intend to satisfy the person himself. If we massage a person's legs, we do not really serve the legs, but the person who possesses the legs. All the demigods are different parts of the Lord, and if we offer service to them, we actually serve the Lord himself. Demigod worship is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita, but actually the shlokas advocate worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda. For instance, worship of Goddess Durga is mentioned this way in Brahma Samhita 544. Shrishti Siddhi Pralaya Sadhana Shakti Eka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibhati Durga Ichchana Rupam Abhiyasya Chacheshtate Sa Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Vajami. Translation. Following the orders of Sri Krishna, the goddess Durga creates, maintains, and annihilates. Sri Krishna also confirms this statement in Bhagavad Gita. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings. Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 10. We should worship the demigods in that spirit. Because the goddess Durga satisfies Krishna, we should therefore offer respects to Goddess Durga. Because Lord Shiva is nothing but Krishna's functional body, we should therefore offer respects to Lord Shiva. Similarly, we should offer respects to Brahma, Agni, and Surya. There are many offerings to different demigods, and one should always remember that these offerings are usually meant to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bharat Maharaj did not aspire to receive some benediction from demigods. His aim was to please the Supreme Lord. In the Mahabharata, among the 1,000 names of Vishnu, it is said, Yagya Bhug, Yagya Krit, Yagya. The enjoyer of Yagya, the performer of Yagya, and Yagya itself are the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the performer of everything, but out of ignorance, the living entity thinks that he is the actor. As long as we think we are the actors, we bring about karma bandha, bondage to activity. If we act for Yagya, for Krishna, there is no karma bandha. Yagya tat kamanon yajya loka yam karma bandhana. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise work binds one to this material world. Following the instructions of Bharat Maharaj, we should act not for our personal satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita 17:28, it is also stated, Ashraya hutam dattam tapastaptam kritam chayat asadit yuchate bharata nacha tatpritya noiha. Sacrifices, austerities, and charities performed without faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead are non-permanent. Regardless of whatever rituals are performed, they are called asat, non-permanent. Therefore, they are useless, both in this life and the next. Kings like Maharaj Ambarish and many other Rajashis who were pure devotees of the Lord simply passed their time in the service of the Supreme Lord. When a pure devotee executes some service through the agency of another person, he should not be criticized, for his activities are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. A devotee may have a priest perform some karma kanda, and the priest may not be a pure Vaishnava, but because the devotee wants to please the Supreme Lord, he should not be criticized. The word apurva is very significant. The resultant actions of karma are called apurva. When we act piously or impiously, immediate results do not ensue. We therefore wait for the results which are called apurva. The results are manifest in the future. Even the smartest accept this apurva. Pure devotees simply act for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the results of their activities are spiritual or permanent. They are not like those of the karmis, which are non-permanent. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.23. Tata sangasya muktasya jnanavastita cetasa yagyaya charita karma samagram pravaliyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. A devotee is always free from material contamination. He is fully situated in knowledge, and therefore his sacrifices are intended for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Omajnana timirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshuranmalitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swabhatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Varijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shivashakam Vitamscha Panchakapa Tarubhyascha Kripasindhavyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the first point Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport is that in performing sacrifices, which are meant to satisfy the demigods, and which are meant for not for pure devotees, he was actually following the orders of Vasudeva. And Srila Prabhupada quotes here, Savadamam Parityajya Mamikam Sharanam Vraja, which is Krishna's instruction to Arjuna that give up your attachment to the different varieties of religion and just surrender into my instructions. So Arjuna was putting forward so many different reasons why he should not fight, and those reasons were from the Vedas, and primarily from the Karma Kanda section and Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas. So Arjuna was posing himself as being learned in understanding the Vedas. But due to the bewilderment that was covering him, he was forgetting the most important information, that the Vedas are all different directions given by Krishna according to time, place, and circumstance to gradually elevate persons to Krishna consciousness. And Krishna was now present personally before Arjuna, and therefore Krishna was able to give Arjuna the most appropriate instruction at that time. So because Maharaj Bharat had been trained from birth by his father, who was actually an incarnation of Krishna, Rishabdev, then he understood this and he never forgot it. Throughout his life as the emperor, he was always aware that all of the duties he was performing were in accordance with Krishna's will. And therefore, whether he was performing his own personal bhakti to Vasudeva, or whether he was chanting the glories of Krishna, hearing about the pastimes of Krishna, or whether he was performing elaborate sacrifices which involved satisfying the demigods, he was never forgetting that this was all Krishna's order. Srila Prabhupada quotes another verse, Bhaktaram Yagya Tapasam Savaloka Maheshwaram. Srila Prabhupada describes this as the peace formula, that one who is aware, one who remembers at all times that Krishna is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the well-wishing friend of all living entities. Such a person is never unduly affected, is never disturbed by any miseries. It's always peaceful. So this remembrance needs to be cultivated. And it's cultivated by performing devotional service under the direction of such great devotees as Bharat Maharaj and such great devotees as the Acharyas. So in previous yugas, This is like in Satya Yuga and Treta Yuga. Then most of the kings and emperors were pure devotees, and they understood the purpose of their activities. But now in Kali Yuga, we have no such rulers. We have no emperors. We have no world rulers who actually understand their duty in relationship to Krishna. In fact, we have none of the governments in the world actually are directing people to worship the Supreme Lord according to the Vedic injunctions. So therefore we have to take shelter of the acharyas. So in Kali Yuga, Krishna is empowered. Krishna has sent great personalities to act as acharyas. So one such person is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And an acharya is expert in administering the Vedic principles according to time, place, and circumstance. And we can see in Srila Prabhupada's case that was true on an individual level, in the sense that he would give different instructions to different disciples. He would give different instructions to different temple presidents, and he would give different instructions to different managers in his worldwide movement. And he would preach in different ways to the general public in different countries. He would preach differently in India as he would in America, or as he would in Fiji. He would preach in different ways. When he was writing his books, then he's preaching for the next, as he says, the next 10,000 years. He's actually preaching for an understanding of how the world can be governed by Krishna-conscious emperors in the future, or Krishna-conscious leaders at different levels. And in his own, although here in this pastime, Maharaj Bharat is engaging in demigod worship, and Srila Prabhupada specifically mentions worship of Goddess Durga. But Srila Prabhupada didn't introduce the worship of Durga in any of his temples and any of the ISKCON centers around the world. Although he personally offered respects to Goddess Durga, as actually when Srila Prabhupada once was in Vrindavan and he heard some festivities going on, and he saw that it was actually Durga Puja being conducted, and he paid his obeisances to Goddess Durga. And actually he always describes Goddess Durga as being the personification of the material energy. She's an expansion of Lakshmi Devi. So she's actually more powerful than all of the demigods, apart from Lord Shiva. So she's certainly to be respected. So why does Srila Prabhupada not introduce her worship? Well, one reason is that the worship of the demigods had been introduced by impersonalists to try to deviate the general public towards an impersonal understanding of the Supreme Person or of the Supreme Power. And therefore Srila Prabhupada saw that this was to actually introduce Durga worship when ISKCON wasn't demographically very strong, in the sense that we don't have, at that time Srila Prabhupada was teaching, we didn't have millions of followers as other impersonalist sampradayas, other impersonalist gurus had. So generally Durga worship was associated with bringing people to an impersonal understanding of the absolute truth. So for that reason, Srila Prabhupada didn't introduce Durga worship. However, in the future, and even now, in temples where we have many qualified Brahmins, many qualified performance of yajna, then that danger is not there. And in fact, that recognition of the position of the demigods can actually help people who have been contaminated by this impersonal conception of the absolute truth, can actually help them come towards Krishna. But it's not in our capacity or in our it's not our duty to introduce this. This is something that has to be done from the highest level of ISKCON, because it would have ramifications throughout the society. However, it's nice to read this purport, and it's a very nice purport to be able to encourage people who are involved in demigod worship to read, because it very clearly explains why demigods were worshipped, and it also explains why they're not worshipped now in our society, because they will take away the focus on the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. We're already so entangled in illusion of being the enjoyer that we don't want more excuse to entangle ourselves further in trying to satisfy our material desires. So in a society where every institution is governed by a Krishna conscious king, and the king has ministers and officers and local regional representatives at all levels, all devotees, all acting for the same purpose, and these kinds of yajnas can take place, and everyone who gets involved in these yajnas becomes very satisfied, and also they get to hear of Krishna's pastimes, because on these kinds of yajnas there's lots of glorification of Krishna's pastimes and Lord Ramachandra's pastimes. So it's the whole society becomes involved in these yajnas, which are for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. As long the Supreme Lord is the performer of everything, but out of ignorance the living entity thinks that he is the actor. As long as we think we are the actors, we bring about karma bandha, bondage to activity. If we act for yajna, for Krishna, there is no karma bandha. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise work binds one to this material world. So, in the society that we've been born into, it seems like a real tall order to do everything for the person without any consideration of our own personal gratification. But in a society where everybody is engaged in that activity, where everyone is engaged in satisfying their parents, their teachers, their gurus, their king, and all of the activities are revolving around executing these different sacrifices, then it's a source of happiness and satisfaction to feel connected in that way. So therefore it's to act work as a sacrifice to Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise work causes bondage in the material world. I remember in the purport to that verse of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, text 9, Srila Prabhupada makes what to me always sounds like such a strong statement, such a demand for total surrender. Nothing should be performed for sense gratification, but everything should be done for the satisfaction of Krishna. This practice will not only save one from the reaction of work, but also gradually elevate one to transcendental loving service of the Lord, which alone can raise one to the kingdom of God. So for us, we've been raised in a society of sense gratification. Especially in the generation which I'm part of, born in Europe or in the USA or Australia in the 60s and 70s, it was all about sense gratification. And not just sense gratification in a collective national sense for the well-being of the country. It wasn't that kind of sense gratification. It was it was very much, His Grace Sri Dayananda Maharaj describes it as the me generation, where everyone was encouraged just to do what they feel like, what they think is going to bring the most satisfaction. But in a culture where all of the activities are already geared towards pleasing one's authorities or the acharyas, then this is not actually a tall order. And actually, this is a source of enthusiasm. It's a source of strength and encouragement and gratitude. So we've been rescued from that extremely hedonistic and degrading society and brought into the association of very wonderful teachers and very wonderful leaders. So we need to get as close as possible to those persons who have this mood of wanting to do everything to please, and then we can be caught up in that enthusiasm. That's what we want to. We want to pray to be caught up in that enthusiasm. Actually, one devotee who's kindly helping me do that quotes a devotee here who says that if we don't do this, we prove that we have no belief in Krishna, which is a very, very dangerous thing. So, Srila Prabhupada describes that we've been bitten by the snake of illusion, and we're almost dead. We're almost dead. We have no connection with Krishna Bhakti. We're completely bitten by the snake of illusion. And now we've been revived by the mantra, the Maha Mantra. And we're so fortunate that we've been, somehow or other, we've come across a snake charmer, even though we were lying completely dead, unconscious, in the desert, with no hope of being revived, in a comatose condition, bitten by the snake. But now Srila Prabhupada's come from the spiritual world with the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and he's created a society in which we can remain connected to, and by which we can actually revive this mood of selfless service. Maharaj Bharat, as I was saying, was expert in understanding how to engage everyone in the kingdom in that selfless service. We're not fortunate to live in that society. We live in the desert where everyone's lying almost dead. Everyone's almost dead, whether they're physically healthy or not. they're actually spiritually almost dead in a comatose condition. And those few of us who've had the opportunity of coming in contact with ISKCON, with the Vaishnavas who've given us the medicine. So it's our duty to give that medicine to others. And just like Srila Prabhupada says when we were reading about him in San Diego, that people are so addicted to sex life that here is a chance. Here's a chance for society. Here's a possibility. Like you were saying, the President Nixon, he's acted improperly, and now he's like, everyone's abandoned him. Go and preach to him. So now the whole society is completely like helpless and feeling like so vulnerable. So the medicine is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Normally, perhaps it would be considered too bold just to go to someone and say, have you tried chanting? Have you tried mantra meditation? It can help you. And just like Srila Prabhupada says, there's no loss, there's no cost, there's no expense, there's no effort. You can chant anywhere. You can chant on your way to work. You can chant on the bus. You can chant anywhere. So this is a great opportunity now, actually, to encourage people to try this chanting. And there are so many media by which we can do that, by which we can introduce this chanting to people. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions online, Brenda?
Just a comment, a great class. Hare Krishna from Mary.
Any questions? Mantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Anantapati Vaishnavrinda ki, Shri Kodanatai Mai Prashashi ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki, Shri Giridhara ki, Shri Narasimha Bhagavan ki, Nitai Gaura Hari Hari Bol.
I was thinking a comment with Prabhupada got eager to speak for devotees to speak to Mr. Nixon, and just if we see anyone who's kind of gone out of the limelight, because if we don't get them, then other people might use their fame for some other purpose, just like Kamsa. He was he's preaching to after Vasi preached to him. Then, but he went back into the assembly of the demons who convinced him to act even more demoniacally. So, if devotees have a chance to meet someone who's kind of lost their fame or their reputation, then it's still worth preaching to.
Yeah, there's a question from Vrinda Devi Mataji. So she's saying that perhaps we know some people, either personally or through our profession, who've lost either health or wealth or reputation, or who are just perhaps a little bit introspective due to the situation in the world now. And now, so we all of us can take it upon ourselves to introduce those people to Krishna consciousness in the way, well, at least we can introduce them to the concept of mantra meditation and let them try it in some way. Because if we don't do so, then there'll be, no doubt there'll be other people who think that they've got the remedy, and that remedy is unless they're extremely fortunate, that remedy will be just a stopgap measure which may give them some temporary relief, but will gradually just entangle them in even more complexities of material nature. So we're all now like the doctors everyone's like in a half-dead condition, and we've got the antidote. We were hearing that one of our friends, congregational members, who's a young doctor, just qualified very recently, is now like doing the work of 3 doctors because of the COVID emergency, and she was asking us for help. So, Srila Prabhupada said the medicine is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra.
She's asking for our prayers.
She was asking for our prayers that we could pray to Krishna that she could have the strength to to maintain her sanity under the stress that she was experiencing. And we certainly will pray for her. And we'll also pray that she can have the insight to be able to help others. She may feel overworked, and also she may feel very much overburdened by the stress of having so much death around. But this also is an opportunity to enable people to hear the mantra. And there's no one. If someone is under a great deal of stress, then no one can complain that they're chanting some mantra while they're going about doing their work. So this will definitely help Mataji in her work if she just tries to chant quietly when she's walking between wards, walking between patients. And perhaps some of the other doctors will ask her why she's chanting. So just a very small attempt, just a very small effort to introduce the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in a new situation will bring us the blessings of all of the acharyas. As Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur specifically said that anyone who preaches Krishna consciousness in a new scenario, a new place, or a new forum, a new area, then that person gets especially blessed by Lord Chaitanya. So any devotees who are going to work and to please chant Hare Krishna whenever it's not going to be a disturbance. So that's my request, and not just for this lady who asked for prayers, but for anyone. There's always living entities around us, and we can always benefit other living entities. Okay, we'll stop there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.